Rugby World Cup 2023 draw was conducted yesterday. I stayed up till bleeding like 1 o'clock in the morning to watch it. YouTube had its issues actually last night. There was a global outage with all kinds of Google products, which was maybe the shock at New Zealand being drawn with Italy again, or the fact that Pool C virtually looks like Pool D from 2019 again. But anyway, let's have a look through the next day now that I've had a chance to sleep it over, and decide kind of who are the winners, who are the losers, and I don't know, some of them I guess will be a bit in between from the draw. We'll start with Pool A, All Blacks, France, Italy, America's one, and Africa one. Obviously, we don't know who these are going to be for sure, but in all likelihood it'll be Namibia, who we All Blacks played at the last World Cup as well. And America's one, you're looking at potentially the USA, Uruguay, Canada maybe. Of these three, I would say Italy is a pretty big time loser in this one. Italy would have loved to get Japan as their Band 2 team, but they got France, who are the hosts. Probably maybe the one team they absolutely did not want to get. They maybe backed themselves more against the Wallabies or the Irish at the moment. I don't know, but against France at home, that seems like a hell of a mission. And they got the All Blacks again. We didn't get to play last time because of the typhoon, but it's looking like a pretty tough job for Italy to get out of the pool. France, I guess it's a bit of a mixed bag. It's not a pool of death because, as I said, they'll back themselves to beat Italy, and they'll get to test themselves against the All Blacks. They got, potentially, as soon as they make it out, a quarterfinal up against one of these three. At home, they'd probably back themselves. But anyway, and the All Blacks, I think they'll be happy with that. I don't know if it's like an absolute win. It's not the easiest possible pool they could have had, but they'll be very confident about going in against Italy. And again, France will be a big test for them. A proper hard test. If it had been Italy and Japan, you might go into that one. Not trying to throw any shade at Japan, but maybe saying it's a bit of a kind of light run. But the hosts, and then you avoid them in a knockout match, I think they'll be pretty pleased with. No way that the All Blacks can draw France in a potential quarterfinal. It'll either be Springboks, Ireland, Scotland, in all likelihood. So yeah. No one, I think, will be over the moon about it, but I definitely think New Zealand and France will be pretty pleased to get Italy, whereas Italy will be pretty distraught to get those two. For these two teams, I think they'll be pretty happy, man. You get to play the hosts and you get to play the All Blacks. It's kind of a once-in-a-lifetime team. Sometimes once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for some of these guys who play for teams like Namibia. You don't really get to play the All Blacks except for Rugby World Cups. Pool B probably looks like the toughest pool of all. Maybe that or Pool C. I don't know. It was interesting because you always thought it's going to be Argentina's pool that's probably likely to be the pool of death, but maybe not. So you got the Springboks, Ireland, Scotland, Asia Pacific one, which will in all likelihood be the Samoa or Tonga. And then you got Europe 2, which could be any number of countries, essentially kind of like the spot that Russia filled at the last World Cup. So Spain, Belgium, I don't know, Germany, who are all those other teams in the representative? Romania got disqualified and whatnot. So a team around about that level. South Africa, it's going to be a testing pool up against two Six Nations teams, but I think they back themselves against virtually any team they could be drawn against, right? You're the world champions. You can't go into it really hoping for an easy draw, and they'll certainly go into it battle-hardened to face likely the All Blacks or the French. So maybe having a tough draw actually suits the Springboks. They'll be backing themselves to get out the pool. Ireland, I think, maybe won't be relishing the prospect of playing South Africa, although it's their first match at a World Cup to be drawn against each other. That's a miracle that it's like the first time ever, so that's going to be pleasing to see. We get to create some history between those two sides. They haven't played for a while, so it's kind of hard to gauge where the two teams are at. I'm sure they'll play each other before the World Cup actually kicks off. I do think, though, Ireland will be pretty pleased at the prospect of playing Scotland. I think if it had been Argentina, they would have been a bit more kind of squeaky bum, if you know what I mean. I think they backed themselves against Scotland. I'm not trying to throw any shade at Scotland either, but Ireland's recent record over Scotland is pretty good, even if Scotland have got a pretty good team as well. But that last match they played, it seemed pretty evident. But, I mean, 2023, who knows? Tonga or Samoa will be doing pretty well to try and cause any upsets in this one. And Europe too will have a pretty tough time. But they'll enjoy being there and getting to play the world champions will be a pretty special moment for them. Pool C. Pool C. Again, it's Wales, Australia, Fiji, and you can pretty much, of all the ones that are undecided, that's probably the most sure that's going to be Georgia. So it's pretty much a replication of Pool D from 2019. They do have the final qualifier, who's going to be like the repechage winner between like the runners-up of all these other tournaments, like the same way Canada qualified for the 2019 World Cup. So, yeah. Who's winning and who's losing this one? I think Wales, I mean, although the draw is kind of familiar and maybe even a bit boring to play the same teams again and again, it could have been worse. I think they probably, given that they recently lost to Scotland and avoid the All Blacks beating Puma's team, I think Fiji for them, they've got a pretty good record over Fiji recently to Wales. It's a long while ago since they lost that game at a World Cup. Maybe it's in some of your recent memories, but it's not that recent. Australia, I think, will back themselves as a maybe chance to go through as top. It's hard to say this many years out. Everyone, based on the historical records, wanted to get Wales, and the way Wales have kind of slipped in the performances recently might suggest that Wales would be the band one team to draw. But again, we're in 2020 and this competition is in 2023, so who knows if Wayne Pivac's able to whip these guys into much better shape in that time. But Vern Cotter with Fiji maybe backs himself. Could he get an upset against one of those teams? Didn't manage it at the World Cup. Obviously, it wasn't Vern Cotter at the last World Cup, and Fiji's loss to Uruguay actually ended up kind of making it all a bit deflating. But maybe Fiji would have liked to see them in the pool with France, because they're a lot more familiar with a lot of those French players, given that a lot of their guys play in the top 14. But it's not an impossible mission for Fiji to qualify. But overall, I think, although that's a tough pool if you include the fact that that's probably Georgia, I think everybody backs themselves to do well in that one. Fiji will be backing themselves as a potential underdog. The Wallabies will think they can go through top, and Wales will think they can go through top as well. So, yeah. Yeah, that'll be a tough one. And Georgia, I think Georgia will be maybe the most disappointed that they didn't get a chance to play Italy. I think that's the most disappointing one for Georgia. But they do get a second crack against Fiji. So, yeah, we'll see. The last one, England, Japan, Argentina, Oceania 1, and America 2. I think England's a pretty big winner from this pool. England's record against Argentina, very, very good. And they'll be backing themselves to beat Japan 100%. So, yeah. And they probably, based on recent history, will look at this pool and back themselves to beat whoever they get drawn against as well. So, yeah. I think Eddie Jones is probably pretty happy with that draw. Japan, I feel like that's a bit of a lose for them. I think they would have preferred Fiji, Italy, then maybe Scotland. I think Argentina is probably the team you least want of the band 3 teams. But that was pretty much everybody's case, right? Nobody really wanted to get Argentina. Although England, like I said, do have a good record against them. So, yeah, that's going to make Pool D interesting. And Argentina, I think, are also a winner in the fact that they've got Japan instead of, like, potentially... Can you imagine if they were here against France and the All Blacks in a pool of death again? Last time they had France and England, so they've still got England, but they've traded France away for Japan, which I think they will definitely take all day long. Oceania 1's going to be Tonga or Samoa. That's a tough pool, but I don't know, they can throw themselves at Japan and maybe try to pick up a win, but how's Japan going to be in 3 years? Don't know. And America's to Uruguay maybe. Could be an interesting one. But yeah, I honestly think the biggest winners are England, maybe Argentina. Probably those two. I think they'll be the happiest of all the countries. Like I said, Ireland is maybe it could have been worse, even though that's a tough pool. I think they'll back themselves against Scotland. New Zealand and France are probably both pretty happy to get Italy. And as I mentioned in Pool C, everybody's got the right to be a wee bit confident without having kind of a clear favourite. But yeah. What do you guys reckon? Anybody else you think did particularly well? Any of these teams you think it's unfortunate? Like I mentioned, Georgia, Italy is a bit of a missed one. I would love to see the All Blacks take on Fiji, but that's not to be. But yeah. You guys let me know your thoughts, and yeah, I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.